I will explain all HTML elements. First, we need a basic understanding. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. HTML is to a web page what a skeleton is to a human. Just as a human skeleton consists of bones, web pages are composed of HTML elements. Elements are surrounded by matching opening and closing tags. Each tag begins and ends with angled brackets. You can extend HTML tags with attributes, which provide additional information affecting how the browser interprets the element. As of this recording, there are 115 HTML elements. I will explain every single one, but not alphabetically, rather grouped by function. And knowing about group 15 will change how you think about the internet. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Group 1 is titled main root, because HTML represents the top level element of an HTML document, so it is also referred to as the root element. All other elements must be descendants of this element. Group 2 is titled document metadata, because this data helps software like search engines or browsers use and render the page. Base specifies the base URL to use for all relative URLs in a document. There can be only one such element in a document. Head contains machine-readable information or metadata about a document, like its title, scripts, and style sheets. Link specifies relationships between the current document and an external resource. This element is most commonly used to link to CSS, but is also used to establish site icons, both favicon-style icons and icons for the home screen and apps on mobile devices, among other things. Meta represents metadata that cannot be represented by other HTML meta-related elements, like base, link, script, style, and the title. Style contains style information for a document or part of a document. It contains CSS, which is applied to the contents of a document containing this element. Title defines the document's title that is shown in a browser's title bar or a page's tab. It only contains text. HTML tags within the element, if any, are also treated as plain text. Group 3 is titled sectioning root, because body represents the content of an HTML document. There can only be one such element in a document. Group 4 is titled content sectioning, because elements allow you to organize the document content into logical pieces. Address indicates that the enclosed HTML provides contact information for a person or people or for an organization. Article represents a self-contained composition in a document, page, application, or site, which is intended to be independently distributable or reusable, for example in syndication. Examples include a forum post, a magazine or newspaper article, a blog entry, a product card, a user-submitted comment, an interactive widget or gadget, or any other independent item of content. A site represents a portion of a document whose content is only indirectly related to the document's main content. Asides are frequently presented as sidebars or callout boxes. Footer represents a footer for its nearest ancestor, sectioning content or sectioning root element. A footer typically contains information about the author of the section, copyright data, or links to related documents. Header represents introductory content, typically a group of introductory or navigational aids. It may contain some heading elements, but also a logo, a search form, an author name, and other elements. H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6 represent 6 elements of section headings. H1 is the highest section level and H6 is the lowest. H group represents a heading grouped with any secondary content, such as subheadings, an alternative title, or a tagline. Main represents the dominant content of the body of a document. The main content area consists of content that is directly related to or expands upon the central topic of a document or the central functionality of an application. Nav represents a section of a page whose purpose is to provide navigation links, either within the current document or to other documents. Common examples of navigation sections are menus, tables of contents, and indexes. Section represents a generic standalone section of a document, which doesn't have a more specific semantic element to represent it. Sections should always have a heading with very few exceptions. Search represents a part that contains a set of form controls or other content related to performing a search or filtering operation. Group 5 is titled text content because these elements identify the content structure for accessibility and search engine optimization purposes. Block quote indicates that the enclosed text is an extended quotation. Usually, this is rendered visually by indentation. A URL for the source of the quotation may be given using the cite attribute, while a text representation of the source can be given using the cite element. DD provides the description, definition, or value for the preceding term DT in a description list, DL. Div is the generic container for flow content. It has no effect on the content or layout until styled in some way using CSS. For example, styling is directly applied to it, or some kind of layout model like Flexbox is applied to its parent element. DL represents a description list. The element encloses a list of groups of terms, specified using the DT element, and descriptions provided by DD elements. Common uses for this element are to implement a glossary or to display metadata, a list of key-value pairs. DT specifies a term in a description or definition list, and as such must be used inside a DL element. It is usually followed by a DD element, however, multiple DT elements in a row indicate several terms that are all defined by the immediate next DD element. Fig caption represents a caption or a legend describing the rest of the contents of its parent figure element. Figure represents self-contained content, potentially with an optional caption, which is specified using the fig caption element. The figure, its caption, and its contents are referenced as a single unit. HR represents a thematic break between paragraph-level elements, for example, a change of scene in a story or a shift of topic within a section. LI represents an item in a list. It must be contained in a parent element, an ordered list OL, an unordered list UL, or a menu. In menus and unordered lists, list items are usually displayed using bullet points. In ordered lists, they are usually displayed with an ascending counter on the left, such as a number or a letter. Menu is a semantic alternative to UL, but treated by browsers and exposed through the accessibility tree as no different than UL. It represents an unordered list of items which are represented by LI elements. OL represents an ordered list of items typically rendered as a numbered list. P represents a paragraph. Paragraphs are usually represented in visual media as blocks of text separated from adjacent blocks by blank lines and/or first-line indentation. But HTML paragraphs can be any structural grouping of related content, such as images or form fields. Pre represents pre-formatted text, which is to be presented exactly as written in the HTML file. The text is typically rendered using a non-proportional or monospaced font. Whitespace inside this element is displayed as written. UL represents an unordered list of items, typically rendered as a bulleted list. Group 6 is titled Inline Text Semantics, because these elements are used to define the meaning, structure, or style of a word, line, or any arbitrary piece of text. A, together with its href attribute, creates a hyperlink to web pages, files, email addresses, locations within the current page, or anything else a URL can address. ABR represents an abbreviation or acronym. B is used to draw the reader's attention to the element's contents, which are not otherwise granted special importance. This was formerly known as the boldface element, and most browsers still draw the text in boldface. However, you should not use B for styling text or granting importance. If you wish to create boldface text, you should use the CSS font weight property. If you wish to indicate an element is of special importance, you should use the strong element. BDI tells the browser's bidirectional algorithm to treat the text it contains in isolation from its surrounding text. It's particularly useful when a website dynamically inserts some text and doesn't know the directionality of the text being inserted. BDO overrides the current directionality of text, so that the text within is rendered in a different direction. BR produces a line break in text, a carriage return. It is useful for writing a poem or an address where the division of lines is significant. Cite is used to mark up the title of a cited creative work. The reference may be in an abbreviated form according to context-appropriate conventions related to citation metadata. Code displays its contents styled in a fashion intended to indicate that the text is a short fragment of computer code. By default, the content text is displayed using the user's agent's default monospace font. Data links a given piece of content with a machine-readable translation. If the content is time or date related, the time element must be used. DFN is used to indicate the term being defined within the context of a definition phrase or sentence. The ancestor P element, the DT or DD pairing, or the nearest section ancestor of the DFN element is considered to be the definition of the term. EM marks text that has stress emphasis. The EM element can be nested, with each nesting level indicating a greater degree of emphasis. I represents a range of text that is set off from the normal text for some reason, such as idiomatic text, technical terms, and taxonomical designations, among others. Historically, these have been presented using italicized type, which is the original source of the I naming of this element. KBD represents a span of inline text denoting textual user input from a keyboard, voice input, or any other text entry device. By convention, the user agent defaults to rendering the contents of a KBD element using its default monospace font, although this is not mandated by the HTML standard. Mark represents text which is marked or highlighted for reference or notation purposes due to the marked passage's relevance in the enclosing context. Q indicates that the enclosed text is a short inline quotation. Most modern browsers implement this by surrounding the text in quotation marks. This element is intended for short quotations that don't require paragraph breaks. For long quotations, use the block quote element. RP is used to provide fallback parentheses for browsers that do not support the display of Ruby annotations using the Ruby element. One RP element should enclose each of the opening and closing parentheses that wrap the RT element that contains the annotation's text. RT specifies the Ruby text component of a Ruby annotation, which is used to provide pronunciation, translation, or transliteration information for East Asian typography. The RT element must always be contained within a Ruby element. Ruby represents small annotations that are rendered above, below, or next to base text, usually used for showing the pronunciation of East Asian characters. It can also be used for annotating other kinds of text, but this usage is less common. S renders text with a strike through or a line through it. Use the S element to represent things that are no longer relevant or no longer accurate. However, S is not appropriate when indicating document edits. For that, use the del and ins elements as appropriate. Samp is used to enclose inline text which represents sample or quoted output from a computer program. Its contents are typically rendered using the browser's default monospaced font, such as Courier or Lucida Console. Small represents side comments and small print, like copyright and legal texts, independent of its styled presentation. By default, it renders text within it one font size smaller, such as from small to extra small. Span is a generic inline container for phrasing content which does not inherently represent anything. It can be used to group elements for styling purposes, using the class or ID attributes, or because they share attribute values, such as lang. It should be used only when no other semantic element is appropriate. Span is very much like a div element, but div is a block level element, whereas a span is an inline level element. Strong indicates that its contents have strong importance, seriousness, or urgency. Browsers typically render the contents in bold type. Sub specifies inline text which should be displayed as subscript for solely typographical reasons. Subscripts are typically rendered with a lowered baseline using smaller text. Sub specifies inline text which is to be displayed as superscript for solely typographical reasons. Superscripts are usually rendered with a raised baseline using smaller text. Time represents a specific period in time. It may include the datetime attribute to translate dates into machine-readable format, allowing for better search engine results or custom features such as reminders. U represents a span of inline text, which should be rendered in a way that indicates that it has a non-textual annotation. This is rendered by default as a single solid underline, but may be altered using CSS. Var represents the name of a variable in a mathematical expression or a programming context. It's typically presented using an italicized version of the current typeface, although that behavior is browser dependent. WBR represents a word break opportunity, a position within the text where the browser may optionally break a line, though its line breaking rules would not otherwise create a break at that location. Group 7 is titled Image and Multimedia because HTML supports various multimedia resources. Area defines an area inside an image map that has predefined clickable areas. An image map allows geometric areas on an image to be associated with a hyperlink. Audio is used to embed sound content in documents. It may contain one or more audio sources represented using the source attribute or the source element. The browser will choose the most suitable one. It can also be the destination for streamed media using a media stream. IMG embeds an image into the document. Map is used with area elements to define an image map, a clickable link area. Track is used as a child of the media elements, audio and video. It lets you specify timed text tracks or time-based data, for example to automatically handle subtitles. The tracks are formatted in WebVTT format or .vtt files called Web Video Text Tracks. Video embeds a media player which supports video playback in the document. You can also use video for audio content, but the audio element may provide a more appropriate user experience. Group 8 is titled Embedded Content because HTML can include a variety of other content even if it's not always easy to interact with. Embed embeds external content at the specified point in the document. This content is provided by an external application or other source of interactive content, such as a browser plugin. Fenced frame represents a nested browsing context, like iframe, but with more native privacy features built in. Iframe represents a nested browsing context embedding another HTML page into the current one. Object represents an external resource which can be treated as an image, a nested browsing context, or a resource to be handled by a plugin. Picture contains 0 or more source elements and one IMG element to offer alternative versions of an image for different display or device scenarios. Source specifies multimedia resources for the picture, the audio element, or the video element. It is a void element, meaning that it has no content and does not have a closing tag. It is commonly used to offer the same media content in multiple file formats in order to provide compatibility with a broad range of browsers, given their differing support for image file formats and media file formats. Group 9 is titled SVG and MathML because you can embed SVG and MathML content directly into HTML documents. SVG is a container defining a new coordinate system and viewport. It is used as the outermost element of SVG documents, but it can also be used to embed an SVG fragment inside an SVG or HTML document. Math is the top-level element in MathML. Every valid MathML instance must be wrapped in it. In addition, you must not nest a second math element in another, but you can have an arbitrary number of other child elements in it. Group 10 is titled Scripting because to create dynamic content and web applications, HTML supports the use of scripting languages, most prominently JavaScript, and certain elements support this capability. Canvas is a container element to use with either the Canvas Scripting API or the WebGL API to draw graphics and animations. NoScript defines a section of HTML to be inserted if a script type on the page is unsupported or if scripting is currently turned off in the browser. Script is used to embed executable code or data. This is typically used to embed or refer to JavaScript code. The script element can also be used with other languages, such as WebGL's GLSL shader programming language and JSON. Group 11 is titled Demarcating Edits because these elements let you provide indications that specific parts of the text have been altered. DEL represents a range of text that has been deleted from a document. This can be used when rendering track changes or source code diff information, for example. Ins represents a range of text that has been added to a document. Group 12 is titled Table Content because the elements here are used to create and handle tabular data. Caption specifies the caption or title of a table. Col defines one or more columns in a column group represented by its implicit or explicit parent col group element. The col element is only valid as a child of a col group element that has no span attribute defined. Col group defines a group of columns within a table. Table represents tabular data, that is, information presented in a two-dimensional table comprised of rows and columns of cells containing data. T-body encapsulates a set of table rows, TR elements, indicating that they comprise the body of a table's main data. TD is a child of the TR element. It defines a cell of a table that contains data. T-foot encapsulates a set of table rows, TR elements, indicating that they comprise the foot of a table with information about the table's columns. This is usually a summary of the columns, for example a sum of the given numbers in a column. th is a child of the tr element. It defines a cell as the header of a group of table cells. The nature of this group can be explicitly defined by the scope and headers attributes. Thead encapsulates a set of table rows, tr elements, indicating that they comprise the head of a table with information about the table's columns. This is usually in the form of column headers, th elements. Tr defines a row of cells in a table. The row cells can then be established using a mix of td, data cell, and th, header cell elements. Group 13 is titled Forms, because HTML provides several elements that can be used together to create forms that the user can fill out and submit to the website or application. Button is an interactive element activated by a user with a mouse, keyboard, finger, voice command, or other assistive technology. Once activated, it performs an action, such as submitting a form or opening a dialog. Data list contains a set of option elements that represent the permissible or recommended options available to choose from within other controls. Field set is used to group several controls as well as the labels within a web form. Form represents a document section containing interactive controls for submitting information. Input is used to create interactive controls for web-based forms to accept data from the user. A wide variety of types of input data and control widgets are available depending on the device and user agent. The input element is one of the most powerful and complex in all of HTML due to the sheer number of combinations of input types and attributes. Label represents a caption for an item in a user interface. Legend represents a caption for the content of its parent, field set. Meter represents either a scalar value within a known range or a fractional value. Opt group creates a grouping of options within a select element. Option is used to define an item contained in a select, an opt grouped, or a data list element. As such, option can represent menu items in pop-ups and other lists of items in an HTML document. Output is a container element into which a site or app can inject the results of a calculation or the outcome of a user action. Progress displays an indicator showing the completion progress of a task, typically displayed as a progress bar. Select represents a control that provides a menu of options. Text area represents a multi-line plain text editing control, useful when you want to allow users to enter a sizable amount of freeform text, for example, a comment on a review or a feedback form. Group 14 is titled Interactive Elements, because HTML offers a selection of elements that help to create interactive user interface objects. Details creates a disclosure widget in which information is visible only when the widget is toggled into an open state. A summary or a label must be provided using the summary element. Dialog represents a dialog box or other interactive component such as dismissible alert, inspector, or sub-window. Summary specifies a summary, caption, or legend for a details elements disclosure box. Clicking the summary element toggles the state of the parent details element open and closed. Group 15 is titled Web Components. They are an HTML-related technology that makes it possible to create and use custom elements as if they were regular HTML. In addition, you can create custom versions of standard HTML elements. Slot is a placeholder inside a web component that you can fill with your own markup, which lets you create separate DOM trees and present them together. Template is a mechanism for holding HTML that is not to be rendered immediately when a page is loaded, but may be instantiated subsequently during runtime using JavaScript. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And if you're ready for more advanced content, consider becoming a free newsletter subscriber at fabianfrankwerner.com/newsletter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.